I'll read the headline again from Stuff. AUT academic cancels guest lecture after claims National Library host tried to censor speech. And many of you would have heard of Paul Noon. He is a very well-known New Zealand historian at the Auckland University of Technology. And he was going to give a lecture in February next year on British policy leading up to the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi, or the Treaty of Waitangi, at the National Library in Wellington. Now, the library, prior to him giving that lecture next year, asked him to provide a summary of his lecture or his talk. And when he did, they kind of said they were concerned that he'd used the word whakapapa with no explanation as to why. So they asked him to take the word whakapapa, which I think we all generally understand as your genealogy, and it's a kind of word that is used in the New Zealand lexicon. So he got told to remove that, and he reluctantly did. He then got a notice from the library that they wanted him to take out a quote from the summary of his speech by the historian John Seeley, who famously described the British Empire as being acquired in a fit of absence of mind. Moon says, according to the library's director, the reason for them wanting him to take it out was there was some anxiety, that's right, some anxiety that the quote could be seen as agreeing with Britain conquering the world. Now, it doesn't matter why or where, but fundamentally you have an academic, a well-known academic, giving a speech and our National Library trying to censor that speech. Is this acceptable? Well, the National Library is administered by Internal Affairs. It is therefore the responsibility of the Minister of Internal Affairs, and the Minister of Internal Affairs, Brooke van Velden, joins us now. Minister, thank you for coming on the platform this morning. Welcome.
Oh, good morning, Sean, and thanks for having me here.
All right. Look, I must say, as one, and I know many of our listeners are proponents of free speech and freedom of thought, this story is, to me, greatly concerning.
Yeah, and I would join you in that concern, Sean. And, you know, I've been a proponent of freedom of speech my entire political career as part of the ACT Party. And one of my first jobs when I became Minister of Internal Affairs was to stop work on regulating or censoring speech online and pausing all of that hate speech work that the previous government was doing. So when I saw that this had happened last week and it was brought to my attention, I contacted the National Librarian just to ask what has been going on here, because it's very important that our government institutions, even including the National Library, uphold impartiality and respect freedom of expression, especially for academics. But I've been assured by the National Library that they do take freedom of expression very seriously. What has occurred in this case has been staff that have misrepresented the National Library's view. And I've been given great assurance that Paul Moon would be very welcome to continue his speech.
Uncensored?
An uncensored speech. There is no desire to censor his speech. But what I understand has been a bit of confusion and misunderstanding about how the summaries of speeches are dealt with between the guest speakers and the library. And I understand that in all cases when the library have guest speakers along, what they do is they try and create a very concise summary of what is in that speech to put up on things like social media and advertise the event. Now, the difficulty here is you've got some very, very smart people who have spent decades of their lives researching and creating opinions and thoughts, who are not necessarily the best marketers. So trying to put all of that information that they've gathered in their heads and what they'll say onto a crowd into a couple of bullet points for social media is always going to be difficult. And they do a summary for all of the guest speakers to put on social media. In this instance, what has occurred is not right, where it appears that there has been changing a summary out of political sensitivity rather than out of summarising for length and clarity. And they've acknowledged that they didn't get that right, and it won't be happening again.
Who's acknowledged that?
The National Librarian, who's in charge of the entire...
And who's
National
that? What's
Library.
their name?
Rachel. Rachel Essen.
Rachel
And
Essen.
I have great.
Has there been a public statement to that effect?
Well, I've put one out.
Yeah.
Of course, the library themselves are responsible for their own communications, but
Yeah.
I've had a very fulsome conversation with her. She does have my confidence because she has also been a proponent of freedom of speech and did say, look, if we weren't wanting him to speak, we wouldn't have invited him in the first place, which I think is actually a really important point to make. They have been doing this, what do you call it, like a series of treaty debates around the treaty for a number of years now, invited Paul Moon to come along and speak. They would still welcome him to be a guest speaker.
And they won't tell him to take out the word whakapapa?
They won't take out anything from his speech. He has the same rights.
What about the summary of the talk that he writes and provides?
Well, look, I can't write his summary for him. But
but the library seem to think they could.
Well, they changed the summary for everybody who's a guest speaker to try and make it concise, so that they can publish why would you want to go, who it is, and what is it about, and as short amount of language possible to put out for advertising purposes. And I understand that that's very normal practice, but the communication in this case has not been acceptable. They do accept that. But for length and clarity, I'm afraid every academic has to deal with this. One of the first things I learned when I finished university.
Kill our babies, Brooke. We have to, edit, leave stuff out of a story. Okay, so the question, and I think we've got Paul Moon slated to come on the show tomorrow, haven't we, Ben? Thursday. Are you going to extend an invitation to him, or does the library invited him to come back?
So it's actually got nothing to do with me as a minister. They've been doing their own
oh, come on, you're in the swim now.
Not at all. So I've spoken with the library, or the head librarian, who assured me that Paul would be very welcome to continue with his speech. They wouldn't look to censor what he says, but they would ask him, and I assume they've already been back in touch, to work with them on a concise summary that they can put out for advertising. And I highly suspect after this furore, there might be great attendance at the National Library.
Yes, it's certainly a good publicity stunt. I want to ask in the broader sense, Minister, and gosh, we did an interview last week with Eunice Goose, the Solicitor General, that suggested certain attitudes on certain things are deeply embedded in all parts of our public service, often attitudes which involve very contestable philosophies and ideologies about things like colonialism, critical race theory, and the like. And that to remove those, and in some cases I think quite destructive and negative attitudes from our public service to ensure we have a truly neutral and well-operating public service might take a little bit of time and a bit of attitude change.